Hello, friends, and welcome to another journey through the shadows of deep time, where science meets mystery and ancient secrets whisper through the ages. Tonight, we're stepping into one of paleontology's most heated battlegrounds, a controversy that has raged for decades and split down the middle. Picture the scientific community right this, a creature so massive it could peer through second-story windows, armed with teeth the size of bananas and jaws powerful enough to crush a small car. For over a century, we've called it the king of the dinosaurs, the apex predator that ruled the ancient world with an iron fist. But what if everything we thought we knew was wrong? Tonight, we're diving deep into the question that has paleontologists arguing in academic halls and research labs around the world. Was Tyrannosaurus rex truly the fearsome hunter we've imagined, stalking its prey through primeval forests? Or was it nothing more than an oversized vulture, a massive scavenger that fed on the leftovers of other predators? This isn't just about one dinosaur. This is about how we understand an entire ecosystem that vanished 66 million years ago. Before we begin this expedition into controversy, I want to know where in the world you're listening from tonight and what time it is there. It always amazes me how these stories of ancient life can connect us across continents and time zones. If you find yourself drawn to these mysteries of the past, a gentle like and subscribe helps this channel grow and brings these stories to others who share our curiosity about the natural world. Now let your mind drift back with me to the end of the Cretaceous period. The world was a different place then, warmer and more humid, with no ice caps at the poles. Vast inland seas divided the continents, and the landscape was painted in shades of green we can barely imagine today. Through this ancient world moved creatures that seem almost too fantastic to believe. And towering above them all was Tyrannosaurus rex, a name that literally means tyrant lizard king. The story of how we came to see T-Rex begins not in the Cretaceous, but in the dusty badlands of Montana in the year 1902. It was there that paleontologist Barnum Brown, working for the American Museum of Natural History, discovered the first partial skeleton of what would become the most famous dinosaur in the world. Brown was a character straight out of an adventure novel, a man who wore a full-length fur coat while excavating fossils in the brutal heat of the American West. He had an eye for spectacular discoveries, and when he uncovered those first massive bones, he knew he had found something extraordinary. The skeleton Brown discovered was incomplete, but what was there told a remarkable story. The skull, though damaged, was enormous over, measuring 4 feet in length. The teeth were unlike anything seen before in the fossil record, not the flat grinding teeth of plant eaters, but curved, serrated daggers designed for slicing through flesh. The leg bones spoke of an animal that stood nearly 13 feet tall at the hip, with powerful muscles that could propel its massive bulk forward at surprising speeds. Henry, when Fairfield Osborn, the president of the American Museum, first described T-Rex in 1905, he painted a picture of the ultimate predator. Here was an animal, he declared, that ruled its day through raw brute force and savage efficiency. The scientific name he chose reflected this vision. Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king, a creature that demanded submission from all other life in its domain. This image captured the public imagination like few scientific discoveries ever have. T-Rex became the star of museum exhibits, the monster of countless movies, the dinosaur that children learned about first. It embodied everything we thought we knew about the age of dinosaurs, a time when giants stalked the earth and only the strongest survived. But science is never content with simple answers. More and as fossils were discovered and technology advanced, some paleontologists began to question the traditional view. The controversy that would divide field fed for decades began with a simple observation. For all its fearsome appearance, T-Rex showed some puzzling characteristics that didn't quite fit the image of an apex predator. The arms, for instance, were almost comically small compared to the massive body. While the animal stood as tall as a giraffe, its arms were barely 3 feet long, smaller than those of a grown human. The hands bore only 2 fingers each, equipped with claws that seemed more suited for grasping than slashing. For a predator that supposedly dominated its world through strength and aggression, these tiny appendages seemed woefully inadequate. Then there was the matter of the eyes. When paleontologists examined the skull more carefully, they noticed something interesting. The eye sockets were positioned not on the sides of the head, as you might expect in a predator that needed to scan for prey, but facing forward. This forward-facing vision creates what scientists call binocular overlap, the ability to judge distances accurately. It's a trait common in hunters, from eagles to tigers to humans. But it raised an uncomfortable question. If T-Rex was primarily a scavenger, why would it need such precise depth perception? The debate truly ignited in the 1990s when paleontologist Jack Horner, curator at the Museum of the Rockies in Montana, began making a case that would shake paleontology to its core. Horner had spent decades studying dinosaur behavior and had developed a reputation for challenging conventional wisdom. He looked at T-Rex with fresh eyes and saw not a predator, but a scavenger. Horner's arguments were compelling and controversial in equal measure. He pointed to the animal's massive size as evidence against active hunting. An adult T-Rex could weigh as much as 7 tons, making it one of the largest land predators ever to exist. Moving such bulk at speed, Horner argued, would require enormous amounts of energy and carry significant risks. A stumble or fall could mean broken bones and death for such a massive creature. He also examined the teeth more closely and found what he considered smoking gun evidence. While T-Rex teeth were indeed massive and sharp, they were also relatively thick and blunt compared to those of known active predators. They seemed better suited for crushing bones than for the precise cutting work required to bring down struggling prey. The bite force, estimated at over 12,000 pounds per square inch, was certainly impressive, but Horner suggested it was designed not for killing, but for breaking open the bones of carcasses to reach the nutritious marrow inside. The sense of smell provided another piece of Horner's puzzle. Studies of T-Rex brain cases revealed that the olfactory bulbs, the parts of the brain responsible for processing scent, were extraordinarily large. This gave T-Rex a sense of smell that rivaled that of modern vultures, creatures that can detect the odor of death from miles away. Why, Horner asked, would an active predator need such an acute sense of smell when sight and hearing would be more useful for hunting living prey? Horner's scavenger hypothesis painted a very different picture of life in the late Cretaceous. Rather than the king of hunters, T-Rex became the king of cleanup crews, a massive garbage disposal unit that helped keep ancient ecosystems healthy by consuming carrion. It was a role that was no less important, but far less glamorous than the traditional view. The paleontological community reacted to Horner's ideas with a mixture of fascination and outrage. Supporters praised his willingness to challenge established thinking and pointed to modern ecosystems where large scavengers like hyenas and vultures play crucial roles. Critics accused him of trying to destroy a scientific icon and argue evidence could that they'd be interpreted in very different ways. As the debate raged, new discoveries continued to emerge from the Badlands and quarries, where T-Rex fossils lay buried. Each new skeleton, each new tooth, each trace, fossil added another piece to the puzzle. But rather than settling the controversy, these discoveries often raised more questions than they answered. Some fossils seemed to support the predator hypothesis. Bite marks found on the bones of Triceratops and other herbivorous dinosaurs matched the spacing and shape of T-Rex teeth. Even more compelling was the discovery of a T-Rex tooth embedded in the tail vertebra of a hadrosaur, a duck-billed dinosaur. The bone showed signs of healing around the tooth, suggesting that the hadrosaur had survived the attack and lived for some time afterward. This seemed like clear evidence of predatory behavior, but the scavenger camp had evidence of their own. They pointed to the rarity of T-Rex fossils as support for their position. In modern ecosystems, scavengers are typically much less common than the animals they feed on. The relatively few T-Rex fossils discovered, they argued, fit this pattern perfectly. If T-Rex had been an active predator, you would expect to find far more specimens in the fossil record. The controversy deepened as scientists began to study not just the bones, but the behavior patterns that might be preserved in stone. Trackways, the fossilized footprints left by dinosaurs as they walked across ancient mudflats and riverbanks, offered tantalizing clues about how these animals lived and moved. T-Rex trackways, when they were found at all, seemed to tell a story of an animal that moved at a relatively sedate pace. The stride length and spacing suggested speeds of perhaps 15 miles per hour, fast enough to cover ground efficiently, but hardly the lightning-quick bursts you might expect from an active predator. Critics of this interpretation pointed out that trackways preserve only a single moment in time, and that T-Rex might well have been capable of much greater speeds when the situation demanded it. The debate took on new dimensions as technology advanced and scientists developed new ways to study ancient life. Computer modeling allowed researchers to estimate the forces involved in T-Rex locomotion and feeding. Some models suggested that the animal's legs were too weak to support high-speed running, lending credence to the scavenger hypothesis. Others indicated that T-Rex could indeed move quickly when necessary, at least for short distances. Biomechanical studies of the skull revealed the incredible power of the T-Rex bite, but they also raised questions about how that power was used. The skull was clearly built for crushing, with thick bones and powerful jaw muscles. But was it designed to crush the life out of struggling prey, or to crack open the bones of animals that were already dead? As we delve deeper into this ancient mystery, we find ourselves confronting questions that go beyond simple predator versus scavenger debates. The truth, as it often does in science, may lie somewhere in the middle, in a more complex understanding of how these magnificent creatures lived and died in their ancient world. The more scientists studied T-Rex, the more they realized that nature rarely creates pure specialists. Modern ecosystems are filled with opportunists, animals that blur the lines between predator and scavenger depending on circumstances and availability. Lions, the undisputed kings of the African savanna, will readily steal kills from other predators or feed on carrion when the opportunity arises. Even tigers, solitary hunters par excellence, have been observed scavenging when fresh kills are scarce. Perhaps T-Rex was not so different. This realization led to what some paleontologists began calling the opportunistic hypothesis. Rather than being locked into a single feeding strategy, T-Rex might have been the ultimate generalist, capable of both hunting and scavenging as circumstances demanded. Such flexibility would have been a tremendous advantage in the unpredictable world of the Late Cretaceous, where droughts, floods, and seasonal changes could dramatically alter the availability of food sources. The opportunistic model gained support from an unexpected source: the study of juvenile T-Rex specimens. For years, young tyrannosaurs had been classified as separate species entirely. The differences between adults and juveniles were so dramatic that paleontologists thought they were looking at completely different animals. But as more complete skeletons were discovered, it became clear that these were simply T-Rex at different stages of development. Juvenile tyrannosaurs told a fascinating story of changing lifestyles. Unlike their massive lumbering parents, young T-Rex were built for speed. Their legs were proportionally much longer, their bodies leaner, their skulls more delicately constructed. They looked less like the bone-crushing giants they would become, and more like oversized versions of smaller, faster predators like Albertosaurus. This suggested that T-Rex underwent a dramatic shift in hunting strategy as it aged, beginning life as an active pursuit predator before transitioning to a more opportunistic lifestyle as an adult. The implications were staggering. If young T-Rex were indeed active hunters, It meant that the species, the necessary wiring and neural, possessed all behavioral patterns for predation. The idea that adult T-Rex had somehow forgotten how to hunt became increasingly difficult to defend. More likely, they had simply adapted their hunting strategies to match their changing bodies and capabilities. New fossil discoveries continued to complicate the picture. In 2005, paleontologists announced the discovery of soft tissue preservation in a T-Rex femur, opening up entirely new avenues of research. For the first time, scientists could study not just the bones of these ancient giants, but potentially their blood vessels, proteins, and other organic compounds. The implications for understanding T-Rex behavior were enormous, though much of this research remained in its early stages. More traditional fossil evidence also continued to accumulate. Bite marks attributed to T-Rex were found on an increasing variety of prey species, from the massive three-horned Triceratops to smaller dinosaurs like the dome-headed Pachycephalosaurus. The pattern suggested an animal that was not particularly choosy about its meals, another point in favor of the opportunistic hypothesis. Perhaps most intriguing was the discovery of what appeared to be cooperative behavior among tyrannosaurs. Multiple T-Rex skeletons found in close proximity suggested that these giants might not have been the solitary hunters depicted in popular media. Instead, they might have lived and hunted in family groups, with different individuals playing different roles based on their age and physical capabilities. The evidence for social behavior remained controversial, as fossil preservation can create false associations between animals that died at different times. But if tyrannosaurs were indeed social, it would revolutionize our understanding of their feeding ecology. Pack hunters are typically much more successful at bringing down large, dangerous prey than solitary predators. A group of T-Rex working together could have tackled even the largest herbivorous dinosaurs of their time. This social hypothesis also helped explain some of the more puzzling aspects of T-Rex anatomy. Those famously tiny arms, long dismissed as vestigial remnants, might have served important functions in intraspecies communication or mating displays. The forward-facing eyes, rather than being adaptations purely for depth perception in hunting, might have been equally important for maintaining visual contact with family members during complex social interactions. As paleontologists grappled with these new possibilities, the debate began to shift away from simple either-or questions toward more nuanced explorations of dinosaur behavior and ecology. The question was no longer whether T-Rex was a predator or a scavenger, but rather how it balanced different feeding strategies throughout its lifetime and across different environmental conditions. Modern analogies became increasingly important in these discussions. Researchers pointed to animals like brown bears, which can be fearsome predators when the situation calls for it, but spend much of their time foraging for roots, berries, and carrion. Or to spotted hyenas, long maligned as mere scavengers, but now recognized as skilled hunters that actually steal more kills from lions than lions steal from them. The Cretaceous ecosystem, where T-Rex lived, was incredibly rich and complex, supporting a diverse array of herbivorous dinosaurs, from the massive, long-necked sauropods to the heavily armored ankylosaurs and the speedy, duck-billed hadrosaurs. This abundance of potential prey suggested that there was room for multiple feeding strategies, perhaps even within a single species like T-Rex. Seasonal variation likely played a major role in shaping T-Rex behavior. During times of plenty, when young, inexperienced herbivores were abundant and vulnerable, active hunting might have been the preferred strategy. During leaner periods, scavenging might have become more important. The ability to switch between strategies based on circumstances would have been a tremendous evolutionary advantage. The debate also highlighted the importance of understanding dinosaur physiology. Were these animals warm-blooded like modern mammals and birds, or cold-blooded like modern reptiles? The answer had profound implications for their behavior and energy requirements. Warm-blooded animals need much more food to maintain their body temperature, making efficient hunting strategies crucial for survival. Cold-blooded animals can survive on much less food, but are also less capable of sustained high-energy activities like long-distance pursuit of prey. Evidence from bone histology, the microscopic study of bone structure, suggested that T-Rex fell somewhere between the two extremes. Like modern birds, which are dinosaurs themselves, T-Rex likely had a metabolism that was higher than modern reptiles, but perhaps not quite as high as modern mammals. This intermediate state would have allowed for bursts of high-energy activity while still maintaining the ability to survive during periods of food scarcity. The picture that emerged was of an animal far more complex and adaptable than either the traditional predator or pure scavenger models suggested. T-Rex was beginning to look less like a one-dimensional movie monster and more like a sophisticated survivor, finely tuned by millions of years of evolution to thrive in one of the most competitive ecosystems Earth has ever known. But even as our understanding of T-Rex behavior grew more nuanced, new questions continue to emerge. How did these giants interact with other large predators of their time? What role did disease and injury play in shaping their feeding strategies? And perhaps most intriguingly, what can the controversy itself teach us about how science progresses and how our understanding of the past continues to evolve? The answers to these questions began to emerge from an unlikely source: the fossilized remains of other predators that shared T-Rex's world. The Hell Creek Formation, that treasure trove of late Cretaceous fossils stretching across Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota, preserved not just tyrannosaurs, but an entire ecosystem of carnivorous dinosaurs. Each of these predators seemed to occupy a slightly different niche, like pieces in an ecological puzzle that was only now beginning to make sense. Among the most significant of these was Triceratops, not a predator itself, but the herbivore in T most common large. Rex's world. The relationship between these two giants became a focal point for understanding how T-Rex lived and fed. Triceratops was no easy prey, standing nearly 10 feet tall and weighing as much as an elephant, with 3 massive horns and a bony frill that could span 7 feet across. This was not an animal that would go down without a tremendous fight. Yet the fossil record showed clear evidence of interactions between the two species. Triceratops' bones bore the unmistakable marks of T-Rex teeth, gouges and punctures that matched perfectly with the size and spacing of Tyrannosaur dentition. But the pattern of these bite marks told a complex story that supported neither the pure predator nor pure scavenger hypothesis. Some Triceratops' bones showed bite marks that had clearly been made after death, when the flesh was already beginning to decay. The teeth marks cut cleanly through bone, with no signs of the animal having struggled or resisted. These were clearly the work of a scavenger, an animal feeding on a carcass that was already well into the process of decomposition. But other specimens told a very different tale. Bite marks on the massive neck frill of some Triceratops showed signs of healing, indicating and lived for months that the animal had survived the encounter, or even years afterward. These were not the marks of a scavenger picking at bones, but evidence of violent confrontations between living animals. Whether these represented failed hunting attempts by T. Rex or territorial disputes between rivals remained unclear, but they certainly demonstrated that tyrannosaurs were willing and able to engage with dangerous living prey. The evidence became even more compelling with the discovery of what paleontologists called the dueling dinosaurs, a remarkable fossil preserving a T-Rex and Triceratops, locked in what appeared to be mortal combat. The Triceratops had its horns embedded in the T. Rex's pelvis, while the Tyrannosaur's massive jaws were clamped around the herbivore's frill. Both animals had died in this position, creating a 67-million-year-old snapshot of predator-prey interaction. The dueling dinosaur specimen sparked intense debate about what exactly it represented. Supporters of the predator hypothesis saw it as clear evidence that T-Rex actively hunted dangerous prey, even at great risk to itself. Scavenger advocates argued that it might represent a dispute carcass rather than an active hunt, or suggested that the T-Rex might have been defending itself from an aggressive Triceratops rather than attacking it. The controversy deepened as scientists began to examine the broader ecosystem in which these interactions took place. The Hell Creek Formation preserved evidence of a world in transition, an ecosystem under stress from changing climate and volcanic activity. Sea levels were dropping, temperatures were fluctuating, and massive volcanic eruptions in what is now India were pumping huge quantities of ash and gas into the atmosphere. In such unstable conditions, flexibility would have been crucial for survival. Animals that could adapt their feeding strategies to changing circumstances would have had significant advantages over more specialized competitors. This environmental context provided another piece of evidence for the opportunistic feeding hypothesis, suggesting that T-Rex succeeded precisely because it was not locked into a single ecological role. The study of coprolites, fossilized dinosaur droppings, added yet another dimension to the debate. Several coprolites attributed to T-Rex contained fragments of bone from multiple species, including both herbivorous dinosaurs and smaller carnivores. The bone fragments showed clear signs of acid etching from powerful passage through a digestive system, and their crushed condition suggested they had been processed by an animal with an incredibly strong bite. More intriguingly, some coprolites contained what appeared to be wood fragments and other plant material. While this might seem to support a scavenging lifestyle, closer examination revealed that these plant materials were likely consumed secondarily as stomach contents of herbivorous prey. The pattern suggested an animal that consumed its prey completely, bones and all, extracting every possible calorie from each meal. This thorough consumption strategy made perfect sense for a large predator in an unpredictable environment. By eating everything, including the calcium-rich bones, T-Rex could maximize the nutritional value of each kill, while also eliminating evidence that might attract competitors or reveal hunting patterns to potential prey. Modern predators, like spotted hyenas, employ similar strategies, using their powerful jaws to crack bones and consume entire carcasses. The bone-crushing capability of T-Rex became a subject of intense study as new biomechanical models were developed. Computer simulations suggested that the Tyrannosaur bite was not just powerful, but precisely controlled. The animal could apparently modulate its bite force depending on what it was trying to accomplish, using lighter pressure to grip and manipulate prey while reserving maximum force for crushing bones and defensive strikes. This level of bite control implied a sophisticated nervous system and advanced sensory capabilities. The skull of T-Rex was riddled with nerve channels that supplied sensation to the jaws and teeth, allowing for precise feedback during feeding. Such neural complexity seemed more consistent with an active predator than with a simple scavenger, though it would certainly have been useful for both. The D to puzzle strategies. Researchers at arm's new feeding of T-Rex continue small studies suggested they might have been more functional than previously thought. While to body size, they relative were incredibly muscular and capable pounds each 100 more of lifting than Tyrannosaur arms suggested that T-Rex might represent species discoveries of other extreme. Recent with purport to a finally larger end of an evolutionary trend toward arm reduction, rather than a completely functionless vestige. Several hypotheses emerged to explain the tiny arms. They might have been used for grasping prey during feeding, for helping the animal rise from a prone position, or for social signaling within tyrannosaur groups. The discovery of what appeared to be display structures on the arms of some specimens supported the signaling hypothesis, suggesting that these appendages played important roles in communication and mate selection. The social behavior of T-Rex became an increasingly important part of the predator-scavenger debate. Evidence for group living among tyrannosaurs continued to accumulate, with multiple specimens found in close association at several dig sites. If T-Rex lived in family groups, it would have profound implications for understanding their feeding ecology. Pack-hunting tyrannosaurs would have been capable of bringing down prey much larger and more dangerous than any solitary predator could tackle. A coordinated group attack could overwhelm even the most heavily defended herbivores, with different individuals playing specialized roles based on their age and physical capabilities. Juveniles might serve as scouts or pursue fleeing prey, while massive adults delivered the killing blows. But group living also implied a more complex scavenging strategy than previously imagined. A family of tyrannosaurs could dominate carcasses more effectively than solitary scavengers, driving away competitors and monopolizing food resources. They could also coordinate their searches for carrion, covering more territory and sharing information about food sources. The discovery of apparent tyrannosaur nesting sites added hypothesis another layer to the social. Large, bowl-shaped depressions found in association with T-Rex fossils showed characteristics consistent with dinosaur nests, complete with arrangements of eggs and evidence of parental care. If tyrannosaurs invested significant time and energy in raising their young, it suggested complex social structures that might have influenced their feeding behavior. Parental care would have created periods when adult tyrannosaurs were tied to specific locations, unable to range widely in search of prey or carrion. During these times, efficient hunting strategies would have been crucial for providing food for both adults and growing offspring. This temporal constraint might have favored opportunistic feeding, with parents taking whatever food sources were most readily available. The growth patterns of T-Rex provided additional insights into their feeding ecology. Studies of bone histology revealed that these animals grew at extraordinary rates, adding more than 4 pounds per day during their peak growth years. Such rapid development required enormous amounts of protein and calories, more than could easily be obtained through scavenging alone. Young tyrannosaurs faced a particular challenge in this regard. Too small to compete with adults for large carcasses, but too large to subsist on the small prey that other sustained predators. They occupied an awkward middle ground in the ecosystem. This size gap might have been bridged through cooperative hunting, with juveniles working together, or with adults to bring down prey that none could handle alone. The isotopic analysis of T-Rex bones provided yet another window into their feeding behavior. Different food sources leave distinctive chemical signatures in the bones of animals that consume them, allowing scientists to reconstruct ancient diets with remarkable precision. Studies of T-Rex isotope ratios suggested a diet that included a wide variety of prey species, consistent with opportunistic feeding rather than specialization on particular food sources. More surprisingly, the isotope data hinted at possibleibalism among can tyrannosaurs. Bite marks on T-Rex bones that matched the size and spacing of T-Rex teeth had been noted before, but they were often dismissed as evidence of scavenging on already dead individuals. The isotopic evidence suggested that T-Rex might have regularly fed on other members of its own species, whether through active predation or aggressive scavenging. Cannibalism might seem shocking from a human perspective, but it is actually quite common among large predators, particularly during times of environmental stress. Modern crocodiles, bears, and big cats all engage in cannibalistic behavior under certain circumstances. For a nistic predator like T-Rex, opportune other tyrannosaurs would simply have represented another potential food source, especially if they were already weakened by injury or disease. The disease patterns preserved in T-Rex fossils provided fascinating insights into the challenges these animals faced. Many specimens showed evidence of healed fractures, infections, and parasitic infestations. One famous specimen, known as Sue, displayed signs of gout, a metabolic disorder that affects the joints and is often associated with high-protein diets. The prevalence of disease and injury among T-Rex fossils suggested that life was harsh and dangerous, even for the apex predators of their time. These path also ecological specimens supported the opportunistic feeding hypothesis. An animal that relied solely on active hunting would likely have died quickly if seriously injured, unable to pursue and subdue prey. But an opportunistic feeder could potentially survive severe injuries by switching to scavenging, or by relying on social group members for support during recovery periods. the evidence for injury survival among T-Rex was particularly compelling. Several specimens showed massive bite wounds that had clearly healed over time, including injuries that would have been debilitating or fatal if the animal had been unable to feed during recovery. This suggested not only remarkable healing capabilities, but also access to food sources that did not require high-energy pursuit of prey. As the debate evolved, it became clear that the traditional predator versus scavenger framework was too simplistic to capture the complexity of T-Rex ecology. These animals were clearly capable of both hunting and scavenging, with the relative importance of each strategy likely varying based on individual circumstances, environmental conditions, and life stage. The question was no longer whether T-Rex was a predator or scavenger, but rather how it balanced these different approaches to survive in one of the most competitive ecosystems in Earth's history. The implications extended far beyond a single species. The T-Rex controversy had sparked a broader re-evaluation of how paleontologists approached questions of ancient behavior and ecology. It highlighted the dangers of oversimplified models and the importance of considering multiple lines of evidence when reconstructing the lives of extinct animals. New technologies continued to emerge that promised to shed additional light on these ancient mysteries. Advanced imaging techniques could reveal details of fossil preservation that were invisible to the naked eye. Chemical analysis could detect organic compounds that survived the fossilization process. And increasingly sophisticated computer models could simulate everything from biomechanics to locomotion to predator-prey interactions. But perhaps the most important lesson from the T-Rex debate was the recognition that prehistoric ecosystems were every bit as complex and nuanced as modern ones. The idea that ancient animals could be easily categorized into simple behavioral roles was giving way to a more sophisticated understanding of ecological flexibility and adaptation. T-Rex was emerging not as a one-dimensional movie monster, but as a complex, intelligent animal that succeeded through versatility rather than brute force alone. This new perspective opened up entirely new questions about dinosaur behavior and evolution. If T-Rex was indeed an opportunistic generalist, what did that mean for our understanding of other large predators throughout Earth's history? How did environmental changes influence the evolution of feeding strategies? And what role did behavioral flexibility play in determining which lineages survived mass extinction events while others perished? The answers to these questions began to emerge from an unexpected source: the teeth themselves. While much of the T-Rex debate had focused on behavior and ecology, researchers started examining the microscopic wear patterns on individual teeth with unprecedented detail. Each tooth, it turned out, told its own story of what its owner had been eating and how it had been feeding. Modern predators and scavengers leave distinctive signatures on their teeth based on their feeding habits. Active hunters typically show wear patterns from gripping and tearing flesh, while dedicated scavengers often display more crushing damage from processing bones and hard tissues. When paleontologists applied these same analytical techniques to T-Rex teeth, the results were fascinating and complex. The wear patterns on T-Rex teeth showed characteristics of both hunting and scavenging behavior. Some teeth displayed the fine scratches and chips associated with processing fresh meat and cartilage, suggesting encounters with recently killed prey. Others showed the heavy crushing damage typical of bone processing emulsion consumption. Most indicating significant of intriguingly, many individual teeth showed both types of wear, suggesting that the same animals had engaged in both behaviors throughout their lives. The distribution of wear patterns across different teeth in the same skull provided additional insights. The front teeth, positioned at the tip of the snout, showed primarily gripping and tearing damage, consistent with seizing and manipulating prey. The massive teeth further back in the jaw displayed the heavy crushing wear associated with bone processing. This differentiation suggested a sophisticated feeding strategy where different parts of the mouth were specialized for different tasks. The implications were profound. Rather than being a simple bone crusher or flesh ripper, T-Rex appeared to have a dental toolkit capable of handling a wide range of feeding challenges. The front teeth could grip struggling prey or tear flesh from carcasses, while the back teeth could crack bones to access marrow and crush tough tissues that other predators might leave behind. This dental evidence aligned perfectly with the opportunistic feeding hypothesis. An animal that could efficiently process both fresh kills and aged carrion would have had tremendous advantages in an unpredictable environment. When hunting opportunities were abundant, T-Rex could actively pursue prey. When fresh meat was scarce, it could fall back on scavenging, using its powerful jaws to extract nutrition from resources that other predators couldn't access. The tooth replacement patterns of T-Rex added another layer to this story. Like all dinosaurs, Tyrannosaurs continuously grew new teeth throughout their lives, shedding old ones as they wore down or broke. Studies of tooth replacement rates suggested that T-Rex went through teeth quite rapidly, possibly shedding and replacing them every few months. This rapid tooth turnover made sense for an animal that regularly processed hard materials like bones. The constant replacement ensured that T-Rex always had sharp, functional teeth available for whatever feeding opportunity presented itself. It also meant that the wear patterns preserved in fossil teeth represented only a snapshot of the animal's feeding behavior during the final months of each tooth's use. The chemistry of T-Rex teeth provided yet another window into their feeding ecology. Trace elements absorbed during feeding could be preserved in tooth enamel, creating a chemical record of diet. Analysis of these trace elements suggested that T-Rex consumed a diverse array of prey species, from large herbivorous dinosaurs to smaller carnivores and even fish. The presence of marine-derived elements in some T-Rex teeth was particularly intriguing. The Hell Creek Formation preserved evidence of coastal and riverine environments, and it appeared that some tyrannosaurs had access to aquatic food sources. Whether they were actively fishing, scavenging beached marine life, or simply consuming other predators that had fed on aquatic prey remained unclear, but it added another dimension to their dietary flexibility. The study of T-Rex bite mechanics also underwent a revolution during this period. Advanced computer modeling techniques allowed researchers to simulate not just the force of the tyrannosaur bite, but also its precision and control. These models revealed that T-Rex possessed one of the most sophisticated biting systems ever evolved. The skull of T-Rex was not simply a massive bone crusher, but a precisely engineered feeding apparatus. The jaw muscles were arranged in complex layers that allowed for different types of biting motions. Fast-twitch muscle fibers provided the explosive power needed for delivering killing bites, while slow-twitch fibers offered the sustained pressure necessary for crushing bones and processing tough materials. The teeth themselves were marvels of engineering. Rather than being simple spikes, they featured complex cross-sections that maximized both cutting efficiency and structural strength. The serrated edges worked like tiny saw blades, while the thick roots provided the anchorage necessary to withstand tremendous forces. Computer models suggested that these teeth could slice through flesh with minimal effort, while also being capable of crushing bones that would defeat other predators. The neural control systems required to coordinate such precise biting were extraordinarily complex. The skull of T-Rex was riddled with nerve channels that provided detailed sensory feedback from the teeth and jaws. This neural wiring allowed the animal to adjust its bite force in real time, using just enough pressure to accomplish its immediate goal without wasting energy or risking tooth damage. Such sophisticated bite control implied cognitive abilities that went far beyond simple mechanical crushing. T-Rex would have been capable of making rapid decisions about how to process different types of food, adjusting its technique based on the size, toughness, and freshness of its meal. This level of behavioral flexibility was more consistent with an intelligent opportunist than with either a specialized hunter or a simple scavenger. The discovery. Rex brain of T cases provided additional evidence for complex cognitive abilities. Endocasts, natural molds of the brain cavity formed during fossilization, revealed that tyrannosaurs possessed relatively large brains for reptiles. The cerebrum, the part of the brain associated with learning and complex behavior, was particularly well developed. More importantly, the structure of the T-Rex brain showed similarities to those of modern birds, which are dinosaurs themselves, and among the most intelligent vertebrates alive today. The regions, social behavior, and problem associated with spatial memory solving were all enlarged relative to other dinosaurs. This neural architecture was consistent with an animal capable of complex hunting strategies, social coordination, and adaptive responses to changing environmental conditions. The sensory capabilities of T-Rex also received renewed attention as new analytical techniques became available. The enormous olfactory bulbs that had originally been cited as evidence for scavenging were re-examined in light of what scientists had learned about modern predators. While it was true that vultures and other scavengers possessed acute senses of smell, so did many active hunters. Bears, for example, have some of the keenest noses in the animal kingdom, yet they are opportunistic predators capable of both hunting prey of smell, allows sense them to locate animals and scavenging. There, detect the presence of competitors and find carrion from great distances. A similar combination of capabilities would have been tremendously valuable for T-Rex in its complex ecosystem. The hearing abilities of T-Rex also proved to be more sophisticated than initially realized. Analysis of the inner ear structure suggested that tyrannosaurs could detect low-frequency sounds over considerable distances. This capability would have been useful for locating both prey and carrion, as the sounds of struggling animals or feeding competitors could carry for miles through the forests of the Cretaceous. The integration of all these sensory systems painted a picture of an animal exquisitely tuned to its environment. T-Rex could smell carrion from miles away, hear the distress calls of potential prey, and use its excellent vision to coordinate complex behaviors with other members of its species. Such sophisticated sensory processing was consistent with an opportunistic lifestyle that required constant assessment of feeding opportunities and environmental conditions. The locomotion studies of T-Rex also evolved significantly as new fossil evidence accumulated and computational models became more estimate sophisticated. Early had suggested that adult tyrannosaurs were too heavy for sustained running, but newer analyses painted a more nuanced picture. While it was true that a full-speed sprint might have been dangerous for such a massive animal, T-Rex appeared to be capable of sustained jogging at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour. This cruising speed was more than adequate for most hunting scenarios. Unlike the lightning-fast pursuit predators depicted in popular media, T-Rex might have been more like a prehistoric version of a wolf, capable of maintaining steady pressure on prey over long distances until exhaustion set in. Such endurance hunting would have been particularly effective against large, heavily built herbivores like Triceratops and Edmontosaurus. The leg bones of T-Rex showed clear adaptations for this type of locomotion. The proportions were optimized for efficiency rather than maximum speed, with long lower leg bones that maximize stride length while minimizing energy expenditure. The muscle attachment sites suggested powerful but sustainable muscle contractions rather than the explosive power needed for sprinting. The trackway evidence also supported this interpretation. While T-Rex footprints were relatively rare, those that had been discovered showed stride patterns consistent with steady, purposeful movement, rather than the erratic patterns you might expect from a scavenger wandering aimlessly in search of carrion. The tracks suggested animals that knew where they were going and were moving with determination towards specific destinations. The growth patterns of T-Rex provided another piece of the behavioral puzzle. Bone histology studies revealed that these animals underwent dramatic changes in body proportions and capabilities as they aged. Juveniles were built like pursuit predators, with long legs and relatively slender builds optimized for speed and agility. As they grew, their proportions shifted toward the massive, powerful build of the adults. This ontogenetic shift suggested that T-Rex employed different hunting strategies at different life stages. Young tyrannosaurs likely relied primarily on active pursuit of smaller, faster prey. As they grew larger and more powerful, they could take on increasingly dangerous prey, eventually becoming capable of tackling the largest herbivores in their ecosystem through a combination of strength, endurance, and intelligence. The adult T-Rex that emerged from this analysis was neither the mindless killing machine of popular imagination, nor the simple scavenger proposed by some researchers. Instead, it was a sophisticated predator capable of adapting its behavior to match changing circumstances and opportunities. It could hunt when conditions were favorable, scavenge when necessary, and employ social cooperation when facing particularly challenging prey. This behavioral flexibility was likely key to the success of T-Rex as a species. The Late Cretaceous was a time of significant environmental change, with fluctuating sea levels, changing climate patterns, and increasing volcanic activity. Animals that could adapt their feeding strategies to match changing conditions would have had significant advantages over more specialized competitors. The evidence for cooperative hunting among tyrannosaurs became increasingly compelling as more fossil sites were excavated. Multiple T-Rex skeletons found in close association at several locations suggested that these animals might have lived and hunted in family groups. The size distribution of these associated specimens was particularly interesting, with mixtures of adults and juveniles that suggested multi-generational social structures. If tyrannosaurs did indeed hunt cooperatively, it would revolutionize our understanding of their capabilities. A coordinated group of T-Rex working together could have tackled prey that would have been impossible for any individual predator to handle. The massive sauropods that occasionally wandered into T-Rex territory, the heavily armored ankylosaurs, and even large herds of herbivorous dinosaurs could all have been potential targets for well-organized tyrannosaur hunting parties. The social implications of pack hunting extended far beyond simple feeding behavior. Cooperative hunting requires sophisticated communication systems, role specialization, and the ability to coordinate complex behaviors across multiple individuals. Modern pack hunters like wolves and lions display remarkable intelligence and social complexity, traits that would have been equally necessary for any hypothetical tyrannosaur hunting groups. The potential for such social complexity in T-Rex was supported by evidence for advanced parental care. Fossil nesting sites attributed to tyrannosaurs showed characteristics consistent with extended parental investment, with evidence for nest guarding and possible food provisioning of young. Such behaviors require not only intelligence, but also the ability to delay gratification and invest energy in long-term reproductive success rather than immediate survival needs. The discovery of apparent tyrannosaur nurseries, areas where multiple nests were clustered together, suggested even more complex social structures. These communal nesting areas implied coordination between different family groups and possibly cooperative defense against predators and competitors. Such behaviors are seen today only in the most socially advanced vertebrates, including some birds and mammals. The implications of tyrannosaur sociality for the predator-scavenger debate were profound. Social predators are typically much more successful hunters than solitary ones, capable of bringing down larger and more dangerous prey through coordination and specialization. They are also more efficient scavengers, better able to dominate carcasses and drive away competitors through superior numbers and organization. A social T-Rex would have been capable of both more sophisticated hunting strategies and more effective scavenging than any solitary individual could achieve. Group members could specialize in different roles during hunts, with some individuals serving as scouts, others as pursuers, and still others as the primary attackers. The same coordination could be applied to scavenging, with different individuals focusing on different aspects of carcass processing and defense. The evidence for tyrannosaur intelligence continued to accumulate as researchers developed new techniques for studying fossil brains. The brain-to-body size ratio of T. rex, while not as high as that of modern birds or mammals, was significantly larger than that of most other dinosaurs. More importantly, the structure of the brain showed clear similarities to those of modern intelligent vertebrates. The enlarged cerebrum of T. rex suggested advanced capabilities for learning, memory, and problem-solving. The well-developed optic lobes indicated sophisticated visual processing abilities, while the enlarged cerebellum pointed to advanced motor control and coordination. Such neural architecture was consistent with an animal capable of complex behaviors, social interaction, and adaptive responses to environmental challenges. The study of T. rex intelligence also benefited from comparisons with modern crocodilians, the closest living relatives of dinosaurs aside from birds. Recent research had revealed that crocodiles and alligators possessed far more sophisticated cognitive abilities than previously recognized, including tool use, cooperative hunting, and complex social behaviors. If modern crocodilians could display such intelligence despite their relatively small brains, the larger-brained tyrannosaurs might have been capable of even more sophisticated behaviors. The tool-use capabilities of T. rex remained largely speculative, but some intriguing possibilities emerged from the fossil record. Unusual wear patterns on some tyrannosaur teeth suggested possible interactions with hard objects that might have served as tools. Stone fragments found in association with T. rex fossils show patterns that damage could have resulted from use or ANV as hammersills during food processing. While such evidence remained circumstantial, the possibility that T. rex might have used simple tools opened up entirely new avenues for understanding their behavior. Tool use would have dramatically expanded their feeding options, allowing them to access food sources that would otherwise have been unavailable. It would also have provided additional evidence for the advanced cognitive abilities necessary for opportunistic feeding strategies. The seasonal behavior of T. rex became another focus of research, as paleontologists developed techniques for detecting annual cycles in the fossil record. Bone growth patterns suggested that tyrannosaurs experienced significant seasonal variation in growth rates, likely reflecting changes in food availability throughout the year. Such patterns were consistent with animals that had to adapt their feeding strategies to match seasonal changes in prey abundance and behavior. During the breeding season, when many herbivorous dinosaurs would have been focused on nesting and caring for young, T. rex might have specialized in hunting inexperienced juveniles or adults, weakened by reproductive stress. During other times of the year, when live prey was less vulnerable, scavenging might have become more important. The ability to switch between strategies based on seasonal conditions would have been a tremendous advantage in the variable climate of the Late Cretaceous. The migration patterns of T. rex also remained largely mysterious, but some evidence suggested that these animals might have moved considerable distances in response to changing environmental conditions. Isotopic analysis of teeth from different geographic locations showed subtle differences that could reflect movement between different habitats or climate zones. Such mobility would have further enhanced their ability to exploit different feeding opportunities as they became available. The relationship between T. rex and the other large predators of its time provided additional insights into its ecological role. The Hell Creek Formation preserved evidence for several other carnivorous dinosaurs that coexisted with tyrannosaurs, each apparently occupying a slightly different niche within the ecosystem. Smaller predators like Dakotaraptor specialized in hunting medium-sized prey, while larger predators like Albertosaurus focused on different prey species or hunting strategies. This predator diversity suggested that there was room in the ecosystem for multiple approaches to carnivory. T. rex might have succeeded not by dominating all other predators, but by finding a unique niche that combined elements of active hunting, scavenging, and social cooperation. Such ecological specialization would have reduced direct competition while maximizing access to available food resources. The study of predator-prey relationships in the Hell Creek ecosystem revealed a complex web of interactions that defied simple categorization. Bite marks on herbivore bones showed evidence for attacks by multiple predator species, sometimes on the same individual. Healing patterns suggested that many herbivores survived predator attacks, indicating that predation pressure was significant, but not overwhelming. The size distribution of herbivorous dinosaurs in the Hell Creek Formation also provided clues about predation patterns. The abundance of large, heavily defended species like Triceratops and Ankylosaurus suggested that predation pressure had favored the evolution of defensive adaptations. Such arms races between predators and prey are common in modern ecosystems and indicate healthy, dynamic ecological relationships. The evidence for scavenging behavior among Hell Creek predators was also abundant. Bite marks from multiple predator species on the same carcasses suggested that scavenging opportunities were actively contested. The pattern of boned that carcasses were thoroughly damaged indicate processed by multiple scavengers, with different species accessing different parts of the remains based on their capabilities and competitive advantages. T-Rex appeared to have held a dominant position in this scavenging hierarchy, with the ability to drive away smaller predators and access the choicest parts of carcasses. But even tyrannosaurs showed evidence of having to compete for scavenging opportunities, with bite marks and injuries that could have resulted from conflicts with other predators over food resources. The integration of all this evidence painted a picture of T-Rex as the ultimate opportunist, an animal capable of exploiting whatever feeding opportunities presented themselves in their complex and competitive ecosystem. They could hunt when conditions were favorable, scavenge when necessary, cooperate when facing challenging prey, and compete when resources were limited. This behavioral flexibility, rather than specialization in any single feeding strategy, appeared to be the key to their success as apex predators. The picture that emerged from decades of research was far more complex than anyone had initially imagined. T-Rex was neither the mindless killing machine of Hollywood films, nor the passive scavenger that some researchers had proposed. Instead, it was something far more sophisticated, a master of adaptation, capable of reading its environment and responding with whatever strategy the situation demanded. This realization forced paleontologists to reconsider their fundamental assumptions about how ancient ecosystems functioned. The rigid categories that had once seemed so clear, predator versus scavenger, hunter versus opportunist, began to blur as scientists recognized that nature rarely creates such pure specialists. Just as modern ecosystems are filled with animals that defy simple classification, the Cretaceous world was populated by creatures whose survival strategies were far more nuanced than early researchers had appreciated. The implications extended far beyond T-Rex itself. If the king of dinosaurs was actually an opportunistic generalist, what did that mean for our understanding of other prehistoric predators? Researchers began re-examining fossils of other large carnivorous dinosaurs, looking for similar evidence of behavioral flexibility. What they found was a pattern that seemed to repeat itself across different species and time periods. Allosaurus, the great predator of the Jurassic period, showed similar evidence of both hunting and scavenging behavior. Bite marks on sauropod bones suggested active predation on some of the largest animals that ever walked the earth, while tooth wear patterns indicated significant bone processing consistent with carrion feeding. Like T-Rex, Allosaurus appeared to have been an opportunist, taking advantage of whatever food sources were most readily available. Spinosaurus, the massive semi-aquatic predator from North Africa, presented an even more extreme example of ecological flexibility. Recent discoveries had revealed that this enormous dinosaur spent much of its time in rivers and lakes, feeding on fish and other aquatic animals. Yet it also showed evidence of terrestrial hunting and scavenging, suggesting an animal that moved freely between aquatic and terrestrial environments in search of food. These discoveries challenged the traditional view of dinosaur predators as highly specialized killing machines each locked into a specific ecological niche. Instead, they suggested that the most successful predators were those that could adapt to changing circumstances, exploiting different resources as opportunities arose. This flexibility might have been particularly important during times of environmental stress, when traditional food sources became scarce or unreliable. The climate of the Late Cretaceous was indeed becoming increasingly unstable as the period drew to a close. Volcanic activity was intensifying, sea levels were fluctuating dramatically, and temperature patterns were shifting in ways that would have stressed ecosystems around the world. In such conditions, behavioral flexibility would have been more valuable than specialization, favoring animals that could modify their strategies in response to changing conditions. T-Rex lived during these final few million years of the Cretaceous, a time when environmental pressures were mounting and competition for resources was intensifying. The ability to switch between hunting and scavenging, to cooperate when necessary and compete when required, would have provided crucial advantages in an increasingly challenging world. It might have been precisely this adaptability that allowed tyrannosaurs to become the dominant predators of their time. The social aspects of T-Rex behavior continued to reveal new complexities as researchers developed more sophisticated techniques for interpreting fossil evidence. Trackways discovered in recent years showed patterns that were difficult to explain unless multiple tyrannosaurs were moving together in coordinated groups. The spacing and orientation of the footprints suggested animals that were maintaining visual contact while traveling, a behavior seen in modern pack hunters but rarely documented in the fossil record. Even more intriguingly, some trackway sites preserved evidence of what appeared to be hunting behavior. Sets of tyrannosaur prints converged on areas where herbivorous dinosaur remains were later discovered, suggesting coordinated approaches to prey. While such evidence remained circumstantial, it painted a picture of predators capable of sophisticated group tactics that went far beyond simple scavenging. The discovery of apparent tyrannosaur communication structures added another layer to this emerging picture of social complexity. Some skull specimens showed enlarged air passages and resonating chambers that could have been used for producing low-frequency vocalizations. Such sounds would have carried over long distances, allowing separated group members to coordinate their activities even when they were out of visual contact. Modern pack hunters like wolves use distance communication systems to similar long-coordinate hunts across large territories. The possibility that tyrannosaurs employed comparable strategies suggested levels of social organization that would have dramatically enhanced their effectiveness as both hunters and scavengers. A group that could communicate over distances could coordinate complex multi-stage hunts, with some members driving prey toward lying others in ambush. The parental care behaviors of T-Rex also received renewed attention as new nesting sites were discovered and analyzed. The evidence suggested that tyrannosaur parents invested considerable time and energy in raising their young, providing protection, and possibly even bringing food to the nest. Such behaviors require not only intelligence, but also the ability to suppress immediate survival instincts in favor of long-term reproductive success. Extended parental care would have created additional opportunities for social learning among tyrannosaurs. Young animals could have learned hunting and scavenging techniques by observing their parents, allowing successful strategies to be passed down through generations. This cultural transmission of knowledge could have accelerated the evolution of complex behaviors and contributed to the success of the species as a whole. The juvenile tyrannosaurs themselves provided fascinating insights into how feeding strategies might have evolved within individual lifetimes. As we've seen, young T-Rex were built very differently from their parents, with proportions that favored speed and agility over raw power. But the transition from juvenile to adult was not simply a matter of growing larger. It involved fundamental changes in body structure, sensory capabilities, and presumably behavior. Recent studies of growth rates suggested that this transition was remarkably rapid, with tyrannosaurs undergoing dramatic changes in size and proportion over just a few years during adolescence. Such rapid development would have required extraordinary amounts of food creating, intense pressure for efficient feeding strategies, the ability to switch between different approaches, hunting when opportunities arose, scavenging when necessary. This vulnerable life would have been crucial during ibellistic stage. The evidence for can behavior among tyrannosaurs also took on new significance in light of these discoveries. Rather than being an aberrant behavior, cannibalism might have been a normal part of tyrannosaur ecology, particularly during times of environmental stress. Large predators frequently turn to cannibalism when other food sources become scarce, and the practice can actually help stabilize populations by reducing competition for limited resources. For social tyrannosaurs, cannibalism might have served additional functions beyond simple nutrition. Dominant individuals might have used the threat of cannibalism to maintain social hierarchies, while the elimination of weak or injured group members could have strengthened the overall fitness of the family unit. Such behaviors, while disturbing from a human perspective, are common among modern social predators and represent effective survival strategies in harsh environments. The pathological specimens of T. rex, those showing evidence of disease, injury, and healed wounds, provided some of the most compelling evidence for the opportunistic feeding hypothesis. Many of these individuals showed injuries that would have been severely debilitating, yet they had clearly survived for extended periods after being wounded. This suggested access to food sources that didn't require high-energy pursuit activities. One particularly famous specimen, known as Sue, showed evidence of multiple healed injuries, including a damaged jaw that would have made normal feeding difficult. Yet this individual had clearly survived for years after sustaining these injuries, growing to become one of the largest T. rex specimens ever discovered. Such survival would have been nearly impossible for a pure pursuit predator, but an opportunistic feeder capable of scavenging and social cooperation might have thrived despite physical limitations. The chemical analysis of T. rex bones provided additional support for opportunistic feeding. Isotope ratios preserved in the bone mineral reflected the diversity of food sources consumed throughout the animal's lifetime. Rather than showing the consistent signatures expected from a specialized predator or scavenger, T. rex bones displayed the variable patterns characteristic of generalist feeders. Trace element analysis revealed even more intriguing details. The presence of elements typically associated with marine environments suggested that some tyrannosaurs had access to coastal or riverine food sources. Whether they were actively fishing, scavenging beached marine life, or consuming other predators that had fed in aquatic environments, this evidence pointed to dietary flexibility that extended well beyond terrestrial hunting and scavenging. The biomechanical studies of T. rex feeding apparatus continued to reveal new layers of complexity. Computer models of jaw function showed that these animals possessed not just tremendous bite force, but also remarkable precision and control. The ability to modulate bite pressure based on the specific requirements of different feeding situations suggested neural sophistication that went far beyond simple mechanical crushing. The tooth replacement patterns of T. rex also supported the opportunistic feeding model. The rapid turnover of teeth, with new ones constantly growing to replace those that were worn or broken, made perfect sense for an animal that regularly processed a wide variety of materials. The different wear patterns seen on teeth from the same individual reflected the diversity of feeding challenges they had encountered throughout their lives. Perhaps most significantly, the study of T. rex hay to influenced began how paleontologists approached the broader question of dinosaur intelligence and behavior. The traditional view of dinosaurs as simple, instinct-driven creatures was giving way to a more nuanced understanding of these animals as sophisticated, adaptable organisms capable of complex behaviors and social interactions. This shift in perspective was not limited to predators. Herbivorous dinosaurs were also being reinterpreted as intelligent, social animals capable of complex defensive strategies and group coordination. The interactions between these increasingly sophisticated herbivores and their predators would have created an evolutionary arms race that drove the development of ever more advanced behavioral strategies on both sides. The Hell Creek ecosystem emerged from this research as a far more dynamic and complex environment than previously imagined. Rather than being a simple collection of primitive creatures following basic instincts, it was revealed as a sophisticated biological community where intelligence, adaptability, and social cooperation played crucial roles in determining survival and success. The environmental pressures that shaped this ecosystem were themselves complex and variable. Climate change, volcanic activity, changing sea levels, and shifting vegetation patterns created a constantly changing landscape that favored flexible, adaptable species over rigid specialists. T-Rex succeeded not because it was the strongest or most aggressive predator, but because it was the most adaptable. This adaptability extended to virtually every aspect of Tyrannosaur biology. Their sensory systems were capable of detecting a wide range of environmental cues, from the scent of carrion to the sounds of struggling prey, to the visual signals of other tyrannosaurs. Their locomotory system allowed for both sustained travel and explosive bursts of speed when needed. Their feeding apparatus could handle everything from delicate manipulation of small prey to the crushing of massive bones. Most importantly, their nervous system was sophisticated enough to coordinate all these capabilities into coherent behavioral strategies that could be modified based on changing circumstances. This neural flexibility was perhaps the most crucial adaptation of all, allowing individual tyrannosaurs to learn from experience and adjust their behavior throughout their lifetimes. The social implications of this behavioral flexibility were profound. If tyrannosaurs could learn and adapt as individuals, they could also share knowledge within social groups, creating collective intelligence that exceeded the sum of its parts. A family group of tyrannosaurs could potentially develop hunting and scavenging strategies that no individual could have devised alone. The evidence for such collective behavior remained largely indirect, but it to ignore was increasingly difficult. The coordinated trackways, the apparent communication structures, the extended parental care, and the evidence for cooperative defense of resources all pointed towards social complexity that rivaled that of modern hunters. Pack complexity were. This social would have created additional advantages beyond improved hunting success. Group living provides protection against predators and competitors, allows for more efficient territory defense, and enables the sharing of resources during times of scarcity. For large predators like T-Rex, which face significant energetic constraints and environmental pressures, these social benefits could have made the difference between survival and extinction. The study of T-Rex metabolism provided additional insights into how these animals managed the energetic demands of their lifestyle. While they were clearly not warm-blooded in the mammalian sense, neither were they simple cold-blooded reptiles. Instead, they appear to have evolved a unique metabolic strategy that combined elements of both approaches. This intermediate metabolism would have allowed T-Rex to maintain higher activity levels than typical reptiles, while avoiding the enormous energetic costs associated with full warm times of full-bloodedness. During abundance, they could ramp up their metabolic rate to support active hunting and territorial defense. During leaner periods, they could dial back their energy expenditure and survive on scavenging and opportunistic feeding. The flexibility of this metabolic system would have been particularly valuable during the environmental instability of the Late Cretaceous. As climate patterns shifted and food resources became less predictable, the ability to adjust energy expenditure to match available resources would have provided crucial survival advantages. Species locked into high-energy lifestyles would have been more vulnerable to extinction when environmental conditions deteriorated. The reproductive strategies of T-Rex also reflected this theme of adaptability. Rather than following a rigid breeding schedule, tyrannosaurs appeared to time their reproduction to coincide with periods of resource abundance. The energetic demands of egg production, incubation, and chick rearing were enormous, and successful reproduction required access to reliable food sources throughout the breeding season. The apparent flexibility in Tyrannosaur reproductive timing suggested that these animals could assess environmental conditions and adjust their breeding behavior accordingly. In favorable years, when prey was abundant and environmental conditions were stable, multiple pairs might breed successfully. In more challenging years, reproduction might be delayed or skipped entirely, allowing adults to focus their energy on survival. This reproductive flexibility would have helped Tyrannosaur populations weather environmental fluctuations that might have driven more rigid species to extinction. By adjusting their reproductive output to match environmental conditions, they could maintain stable populations even during difficult periods, while taking advantage of favorable conditions to expand when opportunities arose. The territorial behavior of T-Rex remained largely mysterious, but some evidence suggested that these animals maintained large home ranges that they defended against other tyrannosaurs. The size of these territories would have varied based on prey density, environmental conditions, and the presence of competitors. During times of abundance, territories might have been smaller and more densely packed. During lean periods, individual tyrannosaurs might have ranged over vast areas in search of food. The defense of such large territories would have required sophisticated navigation abilities and detailed knowledge of local geography. T-Rex would have needed to remember the locations of important resources, recognize territorial boundaries, and navigate efficiently between different parts of their range. Such spatial cognitive abilities implied neural sophistication that went well beyond simple stimulus response behaviors. The interaction between territorial behavior and social structure created additional complexities. Family groups might have maintained collective territories that were larger than those of solitary individuals, requiring coordination between multiple adults to defend effectively. The boundaries between neighboring territories might have been fluid, changing based on seasonal resource availability and the competitive abilities groups of different. Competition between tyrannosaur groups might have involved not just direct physical confrontation, but also more subtle forms of interference competition. Groups might have attempted to monopolize key resources, disrupt each other's hunting activities, or steal kills from rivals. Such competitive interactions would have required sophisticated assessment abilities and strategic thinking that approach the complexity seen in modern social carnivores. The evidence for these complex behaviors continued to accumulate as new analytical techniques were applied to existing fossil collections. Microscopic analysis of bone surfaces revealed details of muscle attachment and wear patterns that had been invisible to earlier researchers. Chemical analysis detected trace compounds that provided insights into diet, metabolism, and environmental conditions. Advanced imaging techniques revealed internal structures that shed light on neural organization and sensory capabilities. Each new analytical approach seemed to add layers of complexity to the T-Rex story. Rather than simplifying our understanding of these ancient predators, technological advances were revealing them to be far more sophisticated than anyone had previously imagined. The simple predator versus scavenger debate had evolved into a rich exploration of behavioral ecology, social evolution, and cognitive complexity that challenged fundamental assumptions about dinosaur intelligence and adaptability. The implications extended far beyond paleontology itself. The discovery that dinosaurs were capable of complex, flexible behaviors had profound implications for our understanding of intelligence and consciousness in non-human animals. If creatures with reptilian brains could develop sophisticated social structures and adaptive behaviors, what did that mean for our assessment of intelligence in modern animals? The T-Rex controversy had also demonstrated the importance of avoiding oversimplified models when studying animal behavior. The initial either-or framework that had characterized early debates was giving way to more nuanced approaches that recognized the complexity and context dependency of natural behaviors. This shift in methodology was beginning to influence research on modern animals as well as extinct ones. Perhaps most importantly, the study of T-Rex had revealed that even the most familiar and well-studied organisms could still hold surprises. After more than a century of research, these iconic dinosaurs were still yielding new insights that challenged conventional wisdom and expanded our understanding of life in the past. The controversy that had once threatened to diminish T-Rex had instead revealed it to be even more remarkable than originally believed. As we stand at the current frontier of T-Rex research, with new technologies promising even more detailed insights into these ancient giants, one thing has become clear. The question was never really whether T-Rex was a predator or a scavenger. The real question was how these magnificent creatures managed to thrive in one of the most competitive and challenging ecosystems in Earth's history. The answer, it seems, lay not in specialization, but in adaptability, not in brute force, but in intelligence, and not in solitary dominance, but in social cooperation. The king of dinosaurs, it turns out, ruled not through tyranny, but through wisdom, flexibility, and the ability to read the ever-changing landscape of survival in a world that had demanded nothing less than perfection from those who would call it home. And in that ancient world of giants and mysteries, T-Rex found its place not as a simple killing machine or passive scavenger, but as something far more impressive, a master of adaptation in an age when only the most flexible could survive. The story of T-Rex adaptability takes on even deeper meaning when we consider the broader context of late Cretaceous North America. This was a continent in the midst of dramatic transformation, where ancient seaways were retreating and new landscapes were emerging. The Western Interior Seaway, that vast inland ocean that had divided North America for millions of years, was gradually withdrawing, leaving behind a complex mosaic of coastal plains, river deltas, and emerging uplands. In this shifting world, the ancestors of T-Rex had to navigate not just the immediate challenges of finding food and avoiding danger, but also the long-term pressures of a changing climate and evolving ecosystem. The fossil record suggests that tyrannosaurs were remarkably successful at this navigation, persisting through environmental changes that drove many other species to extinction. One of the most intriguing aspects of this success was their apparent ability to exploit different habitats as they became available. Isotopic analysis of tyrannosaur teeth from different geological layers shows subtle changes in chemical composition that reflect varying environmental conditions. Some specimens show signatures consistent with coastal environments, while others reflect more inland, forested conditions. Rather than being tied to a single habitat type, T-Rex appears to have followed resources and opportunities wherever they led. This habitat flexibility would have been particularly valuable during the final few million years of the Cretaceous, when environmental instability was increasing. Volcanic eruptions from the Deccan Traps in what is now India were beginning to pump massive quantities of ash and gas into the atmosphere, creating climate fluctuations that stressed ecosystems worldwide. Sea level changes were exposing new land areas while flooding others, creating a constantly shifting patchwork of available habitats. In such conditions, rigid specialists would have struggled to maintain stable populations. But flexible generalists like T-Rex could potentially track suitable conditions as they moved across the landscape, maintaining their populations even as less adaptable species declined. This may explain why tyrannosaurs appear to have been relatively abundant right up until the end of the Cretaceous, when the asteroid impact finally ended their remarkable evolutionary success story. The social structure that enabled this flexibility was likely far more complex than early researchers had imagined. Recent discoveries have revealed what appear to be multi-generational tyrannosaur groups, with adults of different ages and juveniles found in close association. Such age-structured groups would have created opportunities for sophisticated social learning, with experienced adults passing knowledge to younger generation members. The implications of social learning in T-Rex extend far beyond simple hunting techniques. In a rapidly changing environment, The ability to share information about new food sources, changing migration patterns of prey species, and emerging environmental hazards would have provided tremendous survival advantages. A social group could effectively pool its collective experience, creating a knowledge base that exceeded what any individual could accumulate alone. This social dimension also helps explain some of the more puzzling aspects of T-Rex anatomy have emerged from recent research. The famous tiny arms, for instance, may have played important roles in social signaling rather than feeding behavior. Recent studies have revealed that these appendages were far more muscular than their size might suggest, with attachment sites for surprisingly powerful muscles. Computer models of T-Rex arm function suggest that these limbs could have been used for surprisingly forceful grasping motions, though their short length would have severely limited their reach. Rather than being used for capturing prey or processing carcasses, they may have served functions related to social interaction, mating behavior, or communication within tyrannosaur groups. The discovery of what appear to be display structures on some T-Rex specimens supports this social signaling hypothesis. Crests, ridges, and other ornamental features on the skull and arms could have served as visual signals that conveyed information about age, health, social status, or reproductive condition. Such signaling systems are common among modern social animals and would have been crucial for maintaining group cohesion in large, complex tyrannosaur societies. The acoustic capabilities of T-Rex also point towards sophisticated social communication. Analysis of the skull structure reveals enlarged air passages and natinged reason chambers that could have produced low-frequency vocalizations capable of traveling over long distances. Such sounds would have been invaluable for coordinating group activities across the large territories that these animals likely maintained. Modern research has shown that many animals use infrasonic communication, sounds below the range of human hearing, to coordinate activities over vast distances. Elephants use such calls to maintain contact between family groups separated by many miles, while whales employ similar techniques for communication across ocean basins. T-Rex may have used comparable acoustic systems to coordinate hunting activities, share information about food sources, or maintain territorial boundaries. The territorial behavior of T-Rex becomes even more intriguing when considered in the context of their apparent social structure. Rather than maintaining individual territories, family groups may have defended collective ranges that were shared among multiple adults and their offspring. The defense of such large areas would have required sophisticated coordination and communication between group members. Evidence for this collective territorial behavior comes from the distribution of T-Rex fossils across the landscape. Rather than being randomly scattered, specimens tend to cluster in certain areas while being absent from others. This patchy distribution is consistent with animals that maintain defended territories, with clear boundaries between occupied and unoccupied areas. The boundaries themselves may have been marked and defended through a combination of scent marking, vocalization, and physical displays. Modern territorial animals employ a variety of techniques to advertise their presence and deter intruders, and T-Rex likely used similar strategies. The discovery of what appear to be scent glands in some tyrannosaur specimens suggests that chemical communication may have played an important role in territorial maintenance. The seasonal behavior of these territorial groups adds another layer of complexity to the story. Bone chemistry studies suggest that T-Rex experienced significant seasonal variations in diet and activity levels, likely reflecting changes in prey availability and environmental conditions throughout the year. During certain seasons, groups may have concentrated their activities in specific areas where prey was abundant. During others, they may have ranged more widely in search of scattered food sources. These seasonal movements would have created opportunities for interactions between different tyrannosaur groups, potentially leading to territorial disputes, mating encounters, or even temporary cooperation. The fossil record preserves evidence of violent encounters between tyrannosaurs, including bite marks and injuries, only have been inflicted by other that could members of the same species. Such intraspecific conflict is common among modern territorial predators and suggests that competition for resources was intense even among these apex predators. The mating systems of T-Rex remain largely mysterious, but the evidence for complex social structure suggests that courtship and reproduction may have involved elaborate behavioral displays. The sexual dimorphism observed in some Tyrannosaur specimens, with differences in skull ornamentation and body size between males and females, points toward competition for mates and possibly elaborate courtship rituals. Modern birds, the closest living relatives of dinosaurs, display remarkable diversity in their mating systems, from simple pair bonding to complex communal displays involving multiple individuals. T-Rex may have employed similarly sophisticated reproductive strategies, with successful mating requiring not just physical prowess, but also social intelligence and the ability to navigate complex group dynamics. The care of young would have been particularly challenging for such large predators. Tyrannosaur eggs were relatively small compared to the size of the adults, meaning that hatchlings would have been tiny and vulnerable for extended periods. The gap between hatching size and adult size was enormous, requiring years of growth during which young tyrannosaurs would have been dependent on their parents for protection and possibly food provision. Recent discoveries of what appear to be tyrannosaur nesting colonies suggest that multiple families may have nested in close proximity, possibly providing mutual protection for their vulnerable offspring. Such communal nesting is seen in modern birds and crocodiles and provides numerous advantages, including shared vigilance against predators and the two-mount collective defense against threats. The feeding behavior of juvenile tyrannosaurs during this extended period of dependence would have created additional challenges for adult groups. Young tyrannosaurs were built very differently from their parents, with proportions that favored speed and agility over raw power. They may have specialized in hunting smaller, faster prey that adults couldn't catch, while relying on their parents for access to larger carcasses that they couldn't process on their own. This division of labor within tyrannosaur families could have enhanced the overall efficiency of group feeding activities. While adults focused on bringing down or scavenging large prey, juveniles could have supplemented the group's diet by catching smaller animals that might otherwise escape notice. Such cooperative feeding strategies are seen in modern pack hunters and represent sophisticated adaptations to the challenges of group living. The transition from juvenile to adult feeding strategies would have been a critical period in the life of every T-Rex. As young tyrannosaurs grew larger and stronger, they would have gradually shifted from pursuing small, fast prey to tackling increasingly challenging targets. This transition period may have lasted several years and would have required continuous learning and adaptation as their capabilities changed. The role of play behavior in this developmental process cannot be overlooked. Modern young predators spend considerable time engaged in play activities that help them develop the skills they'll need as adults. Young tyrannosaurs may have engaged in similar behaviors, practicing hunting techniques, testing their strength against siblings, and learning the social skills necessary for group coordination. Such play behavior would have been particularly important for developing the complex motor skills required for successful predation. The coordination required to bring down large, dangerous prey while working with other group members would have demanded extensive practice and refinement. Play would have provided a safe environment for this skill development, allowing young tyrannosaurs to make mistakes and learn from them without the life or death consequences of actual hunting situations. The intelligence required for such complex behavioral development was almost certainly beyond what early researchers attributed to dinosaurs. The traditional view of these animals as simple, instinct-driven creatures has given way to a recognition that they possessed sophisticated neural capabilities comparable to those of modern birds and mammals. The brain structure of T-Rex, with its enlarged cerebrum and well-developed sensory processing centers, was clearly capable of supporting complex learning and behavioral flexibility. This cognitive sophistication would have been particularly important during times of environmental stress, when traditional behavioral strategies might no longer be effective. The ability to recognize changing conditions and modify behavior accordingly would have been crucial for survival during the increasingly unstable final years of the Cretaceous period. The dietary flexibility that emerged from this research painted a picture of T-Rex as the ultimate opportunist, capable of exploiting whatever food sources were available in their challenging environment. Chemical analysis of coprolites and bone chemistry has revealed that these predators consumed an astonishing variety of prey species, from massive herbivorous dinosaurs to smaller carnivores and even aquatic animals. This dietary diversity was made possible by their remarkable feeding apparatus, which combined tremendous bite force with precise control and manipulation capabilities. The teeth of T-Rex were not simply crushing implements, but sophisticated tools capable of different types of food processing depending on the situation. The front teeth could grip and manipulate prey, while the massive posterior teeth could crack bones and process tough tissues. The digestive system of T-Rex was equally impressive, capable of extracting maximum nutrition from whatever food was available. Stomach acid, powerful enough to dissolve bone, allowed these predators to consume entire carcasses, leaving little waste and maximizing the caloric return from each meal. This efficiency would have been particularly important for such large animals, which required enormous amounts of food to maintain their massive bodies. The scavenging capabilities of T-Rex were enhanced by their extraordinary sensory systems, which could detect carrion from great distances. Their sense of smell was among the most acute ever evolved, allowing them to locate carcasses that other predators might miss. Combined with their excellent vision and hearing, these sensory capabilities create monitoring a comprehensive environmental system that could detect food opportunities across vast territories. But perhaps most importantly, T-Rex possessed the intelligence to integrate all of these capabilities into coherent behavioral strategies that could be modified based on changing circumstances. They could assess the relative costs and benefits of different feeding opportunities, coordinate complex group activities, and learn from experience to improve their success rates over time. This behavioral sophistication reached its peak in their apparent ability to engage in both active hunting and passive scavenging as circumstances demanded. The evidence suggests that T-Rex groups could switch seamlessly between these strategies, sometimes within the same day or even the same feeding episode. They might begin by scavenging a carcass discovered through their acute senses, then transition to active hunting if fresh prey became available, then return to scavenging if the hunt was unsuccessful. Such behavioral flexibility represented the culmination of millions of years of evolution, producing predators that were perfectly adapted to thrive in one of the most competitive ecosystems ever to exist on Earth. The success of this adaptive strategy is evident in the fossil record, where T-Rex appears to have been relatively abundant right up until the end of the Cretaceous period. The end came not through any failure of their remarkable adaptive abilities, but through a catastrophe so sudden and severe that no amount of behavioral flexibility could overcome it. The asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs struck with a force that no earthly predator could have anticipated or prepared for. In the space of hours or days, the world that had nurtured tyrannosaurs for millions of years was transformed into an alien landscape where their hard-won adaptations were suddenly irrelevant. Yet even in extinction, T-Rex left behind a legacy that continues to influence our understanding of evolution, intelligence, and adaptation. The controversy that once threatened to diminish these magnificent creatures has instead revealed them to be even more remarkable than their original discoverers could have imagined. They were not simple killing machines or passive scavengers, but sophisticated, intelligent animals whose success was built on flexibility, cooperation, and the ability to thrive in an ever-changing world. As we continue to uncover new evidence about these ancient giants, each discovery adds another layer to their story. Advanced imaging techniques are revealing details of their internal anatomy that were invisible to earlier researchers. Chemical analysis is providing insights into their metabolism, diet, and environmental interactions. And computer modeling is allowing us to test hypotheses about their behavior and capabilities with unprecedented precision. The T-Rex that emerges from this modern research bears little resemblance to either the mindless monster of popular culture or the oversized vulture proposed by some scientists. Instead, it represents something far more impressive. A master of adaptation whose success was built not on brute force alone, but on intelligence, social cooperation, and the ability to read and respond to the complex challenges of survival in an ancient world. The debate that began with a simple question about predation versus scavenging has evolved into a rich exploration of dinosaur intelligence, social behavior, and ecological adaptation. It has challenged our assumptions about extinct animals and revealed that the past was populated by creatures every bit as sophisticated as those alive today. Most importantly, it has shown us that even our most familiar and well-studied organisms can still surprise us, reminding us that the natural world, both past and present, holds depths of complexity that we are only beginning to fathom. The story of T-Rex continues to unfold as developed. Each piece, new fossils are discovered, and new analytical techniques are of evidence adds to our understanding, while simultaneously revealing how much we still don't know. The king of dinosaurs keeps its secrets reluctantly, yielding them only to patient researchers willing to look beyond simple explanations and embrace the beautiful complexity of life in deep time. And perhaps that is the most fitting legacy for these magnificent predators, not as symbols of primitive savagery or passive scavenging, but as reminders that intelligence, adaptability, and cooperation have been the keys to success throughout the history of life on Earth. In their ancient bones lies a lesson that resonates across the millions of years that separate us from them, that survival belongs not to the strongest or most aggressive, but to those wise enough to adapt when the world around them changes. The story of Tyrannosaur evolution takes us even deeper into the mysteries of adaptation and survival. When we examine the broader family tree of these remarkable predators, we discover that T-Rex was not an isolated phenomenon, but rather the culmination of a long evolutionary journey that spanned tens of millions of years. The Tyrannosaur lineage began much earlier in the Mesozoic, with smaller, more lightly built ancestors that bore little resemblance to the massive giants they would eventually become. These early tyrannosaurs, creatures like Proceratosaurus and Guanlong, were modest predators no larger than a horse. They possessed the basic tyrannosaur body plan, but lacked the overwhelming size and bone-crushing capabilities of their later descendants. Their teeth were sharp and serrated, designed for slicing flesh rather than crushing bone. Their arms were proportionally much larger, suggesting they played active roles in prey capture and manipulation. The transformation from these early forms to the colossal T-Rex represents one of the most dramatic evolutionary transitions in the predator lineage. Over the course of roughly 50 million years, tyrannosaurs underwent a complete restructuring of their anatomy, behavior, and ecological role. They grew larger, their skulls became more robust, their teeth evolved into bone-crushing implements, and their arms mysteriously shrank to almost vestigial proportions. This evolutionary journey was not a straight line, but rather a complex branching process that produced numerous tyrannosaur species, each adapted to slightly different ecological niches. Some, like Albertosaurus, remained relatively slender and fast, possibly specializing in pursuit hunting of medium-sized prey. Others, like Tarbosaurus from Asia, grew to rival T-Rex in size, while developing slightly different skull proportions and tooth arrangements. The geographic distribution of tyrannosaurs adds another fascinating dimension to their story. These predators were not confined to North America, but spread across the northern continents, with species discovered in Asia, Europe, and possibly even Australia. Each region seems to have developed its own unique tyrannosaur fauna, suggesting that these animals were remarkably successful at adapting to different environmental conditions and prey communities. The Asian tyrannosaurs in particular provide intriguing parallels and contrasts to their North American cousins. Tarbosaurus, sometimes called the Asian T-Rex, was nearly identical in size and basic anatomy, but showed subtle differences in skull proportions and tooth structure. These variations might reflect adaptations to different prey species or environmental conditions, highlighting the flexibility of the Tyrannosaur body plan. Even more intriguing are the earlier Asian forms, like Alioramus, which possessed elongated skulls with distinctive nasal crests. These ornamental features suggest that tyrannosaurs were experimenting with different approaches to social signaling and species recognition. The diversity of skull shapes and decorative features across the tyrannosaur family tree indicates that these were not simply variations on a single theme, but rather sophisticated solutions to different ecological and social challenges. The environmental contexts in which these various tyrannosaurs lived provide crucial insights into their adaptive strategies. The Late Cretaceous world was not uniform, but rather a complex mosaic of different climates, vegetation types, and prey communities. Coastal regions supported different dinosaur assemblages than inland areas, and northern latitudes hosted different species than equatorial zones. T. rex lived in what was essentially a subtropical paradise, where warm, humid conditions supported lush forests and abundant herbivorous dinosaurs. But other tyrannosaurs inhabited very different environments. Some lived in more arid conditions, while others dealt with seasonal extremes that would have created very different selective pressures. The ability of tyrannosaurs to adapt to such diverse environmental conditions speaks to the flexibility of their fundamental basic body plan and behavioral repertoire. Rather than being locked into a single ecological strategy, the tyrannosaur lineage seems to have possessed an inherent adaptability that allowed different species to exploit different opportunities as they arose. This adaptability extended to their relationships with other predators in their respective ecosystems. T. rex shared its world with a variety of other carnivorous dinosaurs, from the swift Dakota raptor to the massive crocodilomorphs that lurked in rivers and swamps. Each predator seems to have carved out its own niche, reducing direct competition while maximizing access to available prey resources. The coexistence of multiple large predators in the same ecosystem initially puzzled paleontologists who wondered how such a system could remain stable. The answer appears to lie in niche partitioning, with different predators specializing in different prey species, hunting techniques, or habitat preferences. T. rex, with its enormous size and bone-crushing capabilities, occupied the apex position, but did not monopolize all predatory roles. This ecological complexity is beautifully preserved in the Hell Creek Formation, where the fossils of numerous predator species are found alongside their potential prey. The bite marks, tooth marks, and other traces of predator-prey interactions create a detailed picture of how these ancient food webs functioned. Rather than simple linear hierarchies, these ecosystems displayed the same kind of complex, interconnected relationships seen in modern environments. The study of these ancient food webs has revealed that the Late Cretaceous was a time of remarkable predator diversity. Beyond the famous tyrannosaurs, the fossil record preserves evidence of pack-hunting dromaeosaurs, semi-aquatic spinosaurs, and a variety of smaller predators that filled ecological roles similar to those occupied by modern carnivores. This diversity raises important questions about the factors that allowed so many large predators to coexist. Modern ecosystems typically support far fewer large carnivore species, suggesting that Cretaceous environments were extraordinarily productive. The warm climate, high carbon dioxide levels, and absence of ice caps may have created conditions that supported much higher biomass levels than are possible today. The high productivity of Cretaceous ecosystems would have been particularly important for supporting the enormous energy requirements of giant predators like T. rex. A 7-ton tyrannosaur would have required massive amounts of food to maintain its metabolism, and the ecosystem would have needed to produce sufficient prey biomass to support viable tyrannosaur populations. Estimates of tyrannosaur population sizes remain highly speculative, but they provide fascinating insights into the carrying capacity of ancient ecosystems. Based on the density of fossils in well-studied formations, researchers have suggested that T. rex populations have numbered in the tens of thousands across their geographic range. While this sounds large, it actually represents a very low population density spread across an enormous area. Such low population densities would have created significant challenges for tyrannosaur social behavior and reproduction. Finding mates would have required extensive travel and sophisticated communication systems. Maintaining territories large enough to support individual adults or family groups would have demanded detailed knowledge of local geography and resource distribution. The energetic costs of maintaining such large territories would have been enormous, particularly for animals as massive as adult T-Rex. The fossil evidence suggests that these predators were capable of covering vast distances, with isotopic signatures indicating movement between different environmental zones throughout their lifetimes. This mobility would have been crucial for tracking seasonal changes in prey distribution and availability. Many of the herbivorous dinosaurs that served as tyrannosaur prey were likely migratory, following seasonal changes in vegetation and water availability. Successful predators would have needed to anticipate and track these movements, requiring sophisticated cognitive abilities and possibly cultural transmission of knowledge about migration patterns. The seasonal behavior of T. rex becomes even more intriguing when considered in the context of reproduction and parental care. The energy demands of egg production, incubation, and chick rearing would have been enormous, requiring access to reliable food sources throughout the breeding season. The timing of reproduction would have been crucial, with successful breeding likely coinciding with periods of maximum prey availability. The evidence for extended parental care in tyrannosaurs suggests that adults invested considerable time and energy in raising their offspring. This investment would have created additional challenges for territorial maintenance and resource acquisition. Parents would have been tied to specific nest sites for extended periods, limiting their ability to range widely in search of food. The solution to this challenge may have been cooperative breeding, with multiple adults sharing the responsibilities of territory defense, nest guarding, and food procurement. Such cooperative systems are seen in modern birds and mammals and represent sophisticated adaptations to the challenges of raising large, dependent offspring. The behavioral complexity required for successful cooperative breeding implies cognitive abilities that approach those of modern social carnivores. Adults would have needed to coordinate their activities, share information about food sources and threats, and maintain stable social relationships, despite the competitive pressures inherent in predator societies. The evidence for such complexity in T-social. Rex continusulate as to Acuum. New analytical techniques are fossil applied to existing collections. Microscopic analysis of bone surfaces has revealed details of muscle attachment and growth patterns that provide insights into behavior and lifestyle. Chemical analysis has detected trace compounds that reflect diet, habitat use, and social interactions. Perhaps most excitingly, advances in computational modeling are allowing researchers to test specific hypotheses about tyrannosaur behavior and capabilities. These models can simulate everything from locomotion and feeding mechanics to predator-prey interactions and social dynamics. While such simulations necessarily involve numerous assumptions and simplifications, they provide valuable frameworks for understanding how these ancient ecosystems might have functioned. The picture that emerges from all this research is of T. rex as a remarkably sophisticated predator, perfectly adapted to thrive in one of the most competitive and challenging environments in Earth's history. Their success was built not on any single characteristic, but on a combination of size, strength, intelligence, and behavioral flexibility that allowed them to exploit whatever opportunities their environment provided. This adaptability may have been the key to their survival through the environmental changes that characterized the final years of the Cretaceous period. As volcanic activity increased and climate patterns became less stable, flexible generalists like T. rex would have been better positioned to survive than more specialized species. Only is the IR that this very adaptability, which served tyrannosaurs so well for millions of years, could not save them from the catastrophic asteroid impact that ended the Mesozoic era. The environmental changes triggered by that impact were so sudden and severe that no amount of behavioral flexibility could have provided adequate adaptation time. Yet the legacy of tyrannosaur adaptability lives on in their surviving relatives, the birds. Modern birds display many of the same characteristics that made tyrannosaurs successful: behavioral flexibility, social complexity, sophisticated communication systems, and the ability to exploit diverse ecological niches. In many ways, birds represent the continuation of tyrannosaur evolutionary success, adapted for a world very different from the one their giant ancestors inhabited. The study of tyrannosaur evolution and ecology has profound implications for our understanding of how large predators function in natural ecosystems. The complexity and sophistication revealed by recent research challenges simple assumptions about predator behavior and highlights the importance of considering multiple factors when attempting to understand ecological relationships. Modern conservation efforts can benefit enormously from these insights. Understanding how ancient predators maintained viable populations, exploited diverse food sources, and adapted to environmental changes provides valuable perspectives on the challenges facing modern large carnivores. The flexibility and adaptability that allowed T. rex to thrive may be equally crucial for the survival of today's endangered predator species. The methodological advances that have revolutionized tyrannosaur research are also being applied to the study of modern animal behavior and ecology. Techniques developed for analyzing fossil bite marks are being used to understand feeding behavior in living predators. Computer models originally designed for simulating dinosaur locomotion are helping researchers understand the biomechanics of modern animal movement. This cross-pollination between paleontological and neontological research is creating new opportunities for understanding the fundamental principles that govern predator ecology across time and space. The lessons learned from studying T. rex are informing research on everything from tiger conservation to shark behavior to the ecology of urban carnivores. Perhaps most importantly, the T. rex controversy has demonstrated the value of maintaining open minds and challenging established assumptions in scientific research. The traditional view of these animals as simple killing machines gave way to a much more nuanced understanding, only when researchers were willing to question conventional wisdom and consider alternative explanations for the available evidence. This lesson extends far beyond paleontology to all areas of scientific inquiry. The natural world is invariably more complex and surprising than our initial models suggest, and progress requires the humility to recognize when those models are inadequate and the creativity to develop better alternatives. The ongoing revolution in our understanding of T. rex behavior and ecology serves as a powerful reminder that science is a process of continuous discovery rather than a collection of fixed facts. Each new piece of evidence has the potential to challenge existing ideas and open up entirely new avenues of investigation. As we stand on the threshold of even more advanced analytical techniques, from ancient DNA extraction to sophisticated biomechanical modeling, the story of T. rex continues to evolve. These magnificent predators, which have captured human imagination for more than a century, still have secrets to reveal about the nature of predation, intelligence, and survival in the ancient world. The debate that began with a simple question about hunting versus scavenging has blossomed into a rich exploration of animal behavior, social evolution, and ecological adaptation. It has revealed T. rex to be not just a predator or a scavenger, but something far more impressive. A master of survival whose success was built on the ability to read, understand, and adapt to the complex challenges of life in deep time. The implications of this adaptability extended into every aspect of tyrannosaur physiology, creating a biological masterpiece that was perfectly tuned for survival in an unpredictable world. Recent studies of tyrannosaur bone histology have revealed growth patterns that suggest these animals could actually adjust their metabolic rates based on environmental conditions. During times of abundance, they could ramp up their growth and activity levels. During lean periods, they could slow their metabolism to conserve energy, much like modern bears entering a state of reduced activity during winter months. This metabolic flexibility would have been particularly valuable during the volcanic winters that periodically swept across the Late Cretaceous landscape. Massive eruptions from the Deccan Traps were already beginning to alter global climate patterns, creating episodes of cooling and reduced sunlight that would have stressed ecosystems worldwide. Animals locked into high-energy lifestyles would have struggled during these difficult periods. But flexible predators like T. rex could potentially dial back their energy expenditure and wait for conditions to improve. The digestive system of tyrannosaurs also showed remarkable adaptations for extracting maximum nutrition from whatever food sources were available. Recent analysis of coprolites has revealed that T. rex possessed stomach acid with a pH level approaching that of modern vultures, powerful enough to dissolve bone and release the calcium and phosphorus locked within. This allowed them to consume entire carcasses, leaving virtually no waste and maximizing the caloric return from each feeding opportunity. The efficiency of this digestive system was further enhanced by an extremely long gut retention time. Food could remain in the tyrannosaur digestive tract for days or even weeks, allowing time for the complete breakdown of even the toughest materials. This thorough processing meant that T. rex could extract nutrition from food sources that other predators might find indigestible, providing access to additional calories during times of scarcity. The dental battery of T. rex represented another marvel of evolutionary engineering, designed not just for crushing, but for a sophisticated array of food processing tasks. The front teeth were blade-like and sharp, perfect for gripping and tearing flesh. The middle teeth combined cutting edges with increased thickness for handling tougher materials. The massive posterior teeth were built like biological sledgehammers, capable of crushing bones that would defeat the jaws of any other predator. But perhaps most remarkably, this dental toolkit was constantly being renewed and refined throughout the animal's lifetime. T. rex replaced its teeth continuously, growing new ones to replace those that were worn or broken. The replacement rate appears to have been accelerated compared to other dinosaurs, suggesting that these predators regularly engaged in activities that caused significant tooth wear. The pattern of tooth replacement also varied across the jaw, with different positions showing different replacement schedules. The front teeth, which were most likely to be damaged during prey capture, were replaced more frequently than the crushing teeth at the back. This differential replacement pattern suggests a sophisticated biological system that could adjust maintenance schedules based on the functional demands placed on different parts of the dental battery. The wear patterns preserved on fossil tyrannosaur teeth continue to yield new insights into feeding behavior. Advanced microscopy techniques have revealed that individual teeth often show multiple types of wear damage, indicating that the same animals engaged in very different feeding activities throughout their lives. Some teeth show the fine scratches and polishing associated with processing fresh meat and soft tissues. Others display the heavy crushing damage typical of bone processing. Most intriguingly, many teeth show both types of wear, sometimes in distinct layers that suggest alternating periods of different feeding behaviors. The chemical composition of tyrannosaur teeth has also provided unexpected insights into their dietary habits. Trace element analysis has detected signatures of marine-derived compounds in some specimens, suggesting that at least some T. rex individuals had access to coastal or aquatic food sources. Whether they were actively fishing, scavenging beached marine life, or consuming other predators that had fed in aquatic environments remains unclear, but it adds another dimension to their dietary flexibility. The sensory capabilities that enabled this opportunistic lifestyle were equally remarkable. The olfactory bulbs of T. rex were enormous, giving these predators a sense of smell that may have exceeded that of modern vultures. Recent computer modeling of Tyrannosaur nasal passages suggests that they could detect the scent of carrion from distances of 10 miles or more, allowing them to locate feeding opportunities across vast territories. But their chemical sensing abilities extended beyond simple odor detection. Analysis of the nasal cavity structure suggests that T. rex possessed a sophisticated vomeronasal organ, similar to those found in modern snakes and lizards. This organ would have allowed them to taste chemical compounds in the air, providing detailed information about the age, condition, and even species identity of potential food sources. The visual system of T. rex was equally impressive, with forward-facing eyes that provided excellent depth perception and binocular vision. The eye sockets were large relative to skull size, housing eyes that may have been as large as those of modern horses. These massive eyes would have gathered enormous amounts of light, allowing for excellent vision even in low-light conditions such as dawn dusk or the deep forest understory. Recent analysis of the skull structure has revealed that the visual cortex of T. rex was highly developed, with neural pathways that would have allowed for sophisticated processing of visual information. These predators could likely judge distances accurately, track moving objects with precision, and integrate visual information with input from their other senses to create detailed mental maps of their environment. These sensory systems' integration of all created an animal that was exquisitely aware of its surroundings and capable of detecting feeding opportunities that other predators might miss. This sensory sophistication was particularly important for social species, as it would have allowed group members to coordinate their activities through subtle visual and chemical signals. The acoustic capabilities of tyrannosaurs add another layer to this sensory sophistication. The skull structure suggests that T. rex could both produce and detect low-frequency sounds that would have traveled for miles through dense forest vegetation. These infrasonic calls would have been invaluable for maintaining contact between group members spread across large territories. Recent computer modeling of Tyrannosaur vocal apparatus suggests that adults could produce calls with fundamental frequencies below 20 Hz, well below the range of human hearing. Such calls could penetrate dense vegetation and travel over long distances with minimal attenuation, allowing separated family members to coordinate their movements and activities even when they were out of visual contact. The social implications of this acoustic communication system are profound. Pack hunters rely heavily on coordination and communication to execute successful group hunts, and the ability to communicate over long distances would have dramatically enhanced the effectiveness of tyrannosaur hunting parties. Different calls could have conveyed different types of information, from simple location signals to complex messages about prey movements or territorial boundaries. The discovery of apparent hearing specializations in juvenile tyrannosaurs suggests that acoustic communication may have been particularly important during the early stages of life. Young tyrannosaurs show evidence of enhanced hearing sensitivity in frequency ranges that would have corresponded to adult vocalizations, indicating that parent-offspring communication was sophisticated and important for survival. This parent-offspring communication would have been crucial during the extended period of dependency that characterized tyrannosaur development. Unlike many modern reptiles, which provide little or no parental care, tyrannosaurs appear to have invested considerable time and energy in raising their young. The evidence suggests that this care extended well beyond hatching, possibly lasting for several years until juveniles were large enough to fend for themselves. The energetic costs of such extended parental care would have been enormous, particularly for animals as large as adult T. rex. Parents would have needed to secure enough food not only for themselves, but also for their rapidly growing offspring. This would have created intense pressure for efficient foraging strategies and may have favored the development of cooperative hunting behaviors. The cooperative breeding hypothesis gains additional support from the discovery of what appear to be communal nesting sites. where multiple tyrannosaur families may have nested in close proximity. Such clustering would have provided numerous advantages, including shared vigilance against predators, cooperative defense of resources, and the two-pool knowledge about local feeding opportunities. Modern studies of communal breeding systems in birds and mammals have revealed that such arrangements require sophisticated social intelligence and the ability to navigate complex relationships between different family groups. The participants must be able to distinguish between relatives and non-relatives, maintain stable territorial boundaries, and coordinate their activities to avoid conflict over resources. The cognitive demands of such social systems are substantial, requiring not just intelligence, but also emotional sophistication and the ability to form lasting social bonds. Recent research on tyrannosaur brain structure suggests that these animals possess the neural architecture necessary for such complex social behaviors, with enlarged regions associated with social cognition and emotional processing. The limbic system of T. rex, the brain region associated with emotion and social behavior, was particularly well developed compared to other dinosaurs. This suggests that these predators were capable of forming strong emotional attachments to family members and possibly even experiencing grief at the loss of companions. Such emotional complexity would have been crucial for maintaining the stable social bonds necessary for cooperative breeding and group hunting. The evidence for emotional sophistication in tyrannosaurs comes not just from brain structure, but also from behavioral traces preserved in the fossil record. Some specimens show evidence of caregiving behaviors, with healed injuries that would have required assistance from other group members during recovery. The survival of severely injured individuals suggests a level of social support that goes beyond simple cooperative hunting. One particularly compelling specimen shows evidence of a tyrannosaur that survived for months or possibly years after suffering a devastating jaw injury that would have made normal feeding extremely difficult. The fact that this individual not only survived but continued to grow suggests that other group members provided assistance during the recovery period, possibly by sharing food or protecting the injured animal from competitors. Such altruistic behavior would have required not just social intelligence, but also the ability to delay gratification and invest energy in the welfare group members. This other level of social cooperation is seen today only in the most advanced social species, including primates, elephants, and certain birds. The possibility that tyrannosaurs possessed similar capabilities suggests that these ancient predators were far more sophisticated than anyone had previously imagined. The implications of tyrannosaurs' social complexity extend far beyond simple feeding behavior. If these animals lived in stable social groups with complex internal relationships, they would have needed sophisticated communication systems, conflict resolution mechanisms, and ways of maintaining group cohesion despite the competitive pressures inherent in predator societies. The evidence suggests that tyrannosaur groups may have been organized around dominance hierarchies, with older, larger individuals holding leadership positions and younger animals occupying subordinate roles. Such hierarchical systems are common among modern social predators and provide numerous advantages, including reduced internal conflict and more efficient decision-making during group activities. The establishment and maintenance of these hierarchies would have required continuous social interaction and assessment. Individual tyrannosaurs would have needed to evaluate the competitive abilities of their group mates, adjust their behavior based on their position in the social order, and navigate the complex dynamics that characterize all social groups. The behavioral flexibility required for successful participation in such social systems would have been extraordinary. Individual tyrannosaurs would have needed to function effectively in multiple roles throughout their lifetimes, from dependent juveniles to subordinate adults to dominant leaders. Each role would have required different behavioral strategies and social skills. The transition between these roles would have been particularly challenging, requiring individuals to recognize when their status was changing and adjust their behavior accordingly. Young tyrannosaurs reaching sexual maturity would have faced the challenge of establishing themselves as reproductive adults within the existing social structure. This process might have involved dispersal from their natal groups to seek breeding opportunities elsewhere, or competition for position within their existing groups. The mating systems of tyrannosaurs remain largely mysterious, but the evidence for complex social structure suggests that courtship and reproduction involved elaborate behavioral displays and possibly extended pair bonding. The sexual dimorphism observed in some tyrannosaur specimens indicates that males and females played different roles in reproduction, with implications for social organization and territorial behavior. The discovery of apparent display structures on some tyrannosaur skulls supports the hypothesis that courtship involved visual displays similar to those seen in modern birds. Crests, ridges, and other ornamental features may have served as signals of health, genetic quality, or social status that influenced mate choice and reproductive success. The energetic costs of reproduction would have been particularly challenging for tyrannosaur females, which would have needed to produce large clutches of eggs while maintaining their own massive bodies. The calcium requirements alone would have been enormous, possibly requiring access to bone-rich diets during the breeding season. The nesting behavior of tyrannosaurs appears to have been sophisticated, with evidence for site selection, nest construction, and extended incubation periods. Some nesting sites show evidence of multiple nesting attempts, suggesting that adults return to the same locations year after year. Such site fidelity would have required excellent spatial memory and navigation abilities. The protection of nesting sites would have been crucial for reproductive success, as tyrannosaur eggs and hatchlings would have been vulnerable to a variety of predators and environmental hazards. The clustering of multiple nests in some locations suggests that communal nesting provided enhanced protection through shared vigilance and cooperative defense. The hatching process itself would have been a critical period, with tiny, vulnerable hatchlings emerging into a world filled with dangers. Recent studies suggest that tyrannosaur hatchlings were remarkably small relative to adult size, meaning they would have required extensive parental care and protection during their early development. The growth patterns of juvenile tyrannosaurs indicate that they experienced one of the most rapid growth spurts known in the animal kingdom, adding thousands of pounds over just a few years. This explosive growth would have required enormous amounts of high-quality protein, creating intense pressure for efficient foraging strategies during the juvenile period. The dietary requirements of growing tyrannosaurs may have influenced family group composition and territorial behavior. Groups with multiple juveniles would have needed access to larger territories or more productive hunting grounds to meet the collective food requirements of the family. This might have led to increased territorial aggression or the formation of larger, more complex social groups capable of defending expanded territories. The transition from juvenile to adult feeding strategies would have been a gradual process, with young tyrannosaurs slowly developing the size, strength, and skills necessary to handle increasingly challenging prey. During this transition period, they would have been particularly dependent on learning opportunities provided by their parents and other group members. The role of social learning in tyrannosaur development cannot be overstated. Young animals would have learned not just hunting techniques, but also information about territorial boundaries, seasonal migration patterns of prey species, the locations of important resources, and the complex social rules that governed group behavior. This cultural transmission of knowledge would have allowed successful strategies to be passed down through generations. The accumulation of cultural knowledge over multiple generations could have led to the development of sophisticated hunting traditions and territorial practices that were passed down within tyrannosaur lineages. Different family groups might have developed distinct hunting specializations or territorial preferences that were maintained through social learning rather than genetic inheritance. This cultural evolution would have allowed tyrannosaur populations to adapt to local conditions more rapidly than genetic evolution alone could have accomplished. Groups living in different environments could have developed different behavioral traditions suited to their particular circumstances, while maintaining the basic tyrannosaur body plan and capabilities. The evidence for such cultural diversity comes from subtle differences in behavior patterns preserved at different fossil sites. Tyrannosaur populations from different geographic regions show slightly different patterns of bone modification, territory use, and prey selection that might reflect locally adapted behavioral traditions rather than genetic differences. The maintenance of these cultural traditions would have required sophisticated cognitive abilities, including the capacity for imitation, social learning, and the transmission of complex information between generations. Recent research on tyrannosaur brain structure suggests that these animals possess the neural architecture necessary for such advanced cognitive abilities. The prefrontal cortex of T. rex, the brain region associated with planning, decision-making, and complex problem-solving, was highly developed compared to other dinosaurs. This suggests that these predators were capable of sophisticated cognitive processes, including the ability to plan future actions, evaluate complex situations, and develop creative solutions to novel problems. Such cognitive sophistication would have been particularly valuable during the environmental instability that characterized the final years of the Cretaceous period. As volcanic activity increased and climate patterns became less predictable, the ability to recognize changing conditions and develop adaptive responses would have been crucial for survival. The behavioral flexibility that emerged from this cognitive sophistication may have been the key factor that allowed tyrannosaurs to thrive during a time when many other species were declining. Their ability to switch between different feeding strategies, exploit new resources as their behavior became available, and modify response to changing conditions would have provided significant advantages over more rigid competitors. This adaptability was not just individual, but collective, emerging from the complex social systems that allowed tyrannosaur groups to pool their knowledge and coordinate their responses to environmental challenges. The combination of individual intelligence and social cooperation created a level of behavioral sophistication that approached that of modern social mammals. The success of this adaptive strategy is evident in the fossil record, where tyrannosaurs appear to have maintained stable populations and continued to diversify right up until the end of the Cretaceous period. They were not a declining lineage struggling against environmental pressures, but rather a thriving group of predators that had found the perfect balance between specialization and flexibility. The asteroid impact that ended their reign came not as the final blow to a failing evolutionary experiment, but as a catastrophic interruption of one of the most successful predator lineages in Earth's history. The environmental changes triggered by that impact were so sudden and severe that no amount of behavioral sophistication could have provided adequate time for adaptation. Yet in their 68 million years of absence, tyrannosaurs have continued to teach us about the nature of predation, intelligence, and adaptation. Each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of how these remarkable creatures lived, hunted, and thrived in their ancient world. The simple question that began this investigation has blossomed into a rich exploration of animal behavior that continues to challenge our assumptions about intelligence and complexity in extinct organisms. The legacy of T. rex extends far beyond paleontology, influencing how we think about predator ecology, social evolution, and the relationship between intelligence and survival. These ancient giants remind us that success in nature comes not from brute force alone, but from the ability to read, understand, and adapt to the complex challenges of an ever-changing world. As we continue to uncover their secrets, tyrannosaurs serve as ambassadors from deep time, carrying messages about the sophisticated nature of ancient life and the remarkable paths that evolution can take. They remind us that the past was not populated by simple, primitive creatures, but by complex organisms whose intelligence and adaptability rivaled that of any predator alive today. The controversy that once threatened to diminish these magnificent predators has instead revealed them to be even more extraordinary than their original discoverers could have imagined. They were not just predators or scavengers, but masters of survival whose success was built on a foundation of intelligence, cooperation, and behavioral flexibility that allowed them to reign as kings of their ancient world. And so we come to the end of our journey through deep time, having followed the evidence wherever it led us through the shadows of ancient worlds. The question that brought us here tonight, whether T-Rex was predator or scavenger, has revealed itself to be far richer than anyone could have imagined. The answer, it seems, was never either or, but both and more. These magnificent giants were opportunists, masters of adaptation, who succeeded not through simple savagery, but through intelligence, flexibility, and the wisdom to read their ever-changing world. In their ancient bones lies a lesson that echoes across 66 million years, that survival belongs not to the strongest, but to those wise enough to bend when the world demands it.